Hey guys, welcome back to the Be Lead, Be Real, Be Bold podcast. I'm honored to have a very unique guest on the podcast today. Orit Krug is a dance therapy instructor, so well versed in her very unique place in this world. Hi, how are you today?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for joining me again. And we were just catching up before we hit record. I got to know you a little bit better, but how and why did you get into dance therapy as your mission and personal purpose in your life?
Yeah. So specifically, I'm a board certified dance movement therapist for women who have experienced past trauma, who have gone through all different types of psychotherapy and healing modalities, and they have this amazing awareness about their trauma, but like in terms of being able to shift their patterns and behaviors, they just haven't been able to feel a shift, and it's really affecting their relationships. So I specifically help women who are currently in really healthy, amazing relationships, but they push their partner away due to their past trauma. And that's on purpose because I have lived that. When I met he's my husband now, but when I met him and we started dating, I was doing a lot of things to push him away. I felt really insecure. I felt jealous about everything. I was nitpicking. I had a whole lot of trauma from my past, and it was really, really getting in the way of me enjoying this man who I finally, like, literally had dreams about meeting, not him, but like, the faceless, like, really awesome partner. And I couldn't appreciate it because my body and my nervous system was just so adapted and used to drama and trauma. Whereas like, I was like, this is too good to be true. Something's going to go wrong here.
Mm-hmm.
I had already been in talk therapy for 3 years by the time I met him. And I knew why I was pushing him away. I knew I was insecure, but as much cognitive awareness as I had, I couldn't seem to shift my patterns. And that's when I was like, all right, the talk therapy was helpful, helped me draw some good connections. But if I really want to, heal my trauma from that's stored in my body and change my behaviors, I'm going to have to like do something that involves my body. And at that point, I had just gotten my master's in dance movement therapy. So I was like, yeah, I know this stuff is powerful. So I'm going to go and see a dance therapist myself.
That's amazing. And I can resonate with your story so much because we're fans of the attachment theory around here. And as a fearful avoidant, I crave close connections so much. And I do want that relationship that you're describing that you have with your husband. But on occasion, I will self-sabotage in such a big way that it completely pushes somebody away from me.
Yeah. I can totally relate to that.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing. I mean, that's a big share, and I'm so glad to hear it the way that you phrased it. And you did say drama in there, and we were kind of poking around the Enneagram a little bit. That you're the individualist, the type 4, and I'm hearing from the story you were telling me earlier that there's been a transition for you since you started the dance and movement therapy from this drama that you were creating to now more of like a conscious place of living. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yeah, I had a real turning point about a little less than a year into my relationship with Aaron, because we were sitting in my apartment, and I was living in New York City at the time, and we had just gotten into, not an argument, but something big had happened. We had actually just gone to Cancun, and he had disappeared for the night. Like, there's no service, and I just got really, really upset, and we couldn't come to some sort of peace about that. And we were at my apartment a couple of days later after getting back, and he broke up with me. And I was like, I was just kind of stunned and like, what? This is happening again? Because I've been through many breakups. And yeah, it was a real turning point, because I knew that I had created this, I kind of manifested this, because I had just been testing him and pushing him away to the point where I was successful. And it was like a self-fulfilling prophecy of, he's going to leave, he's not going to stick around, I'm not worthy of his love. And I created that reality where he, it was frustrating for him to try to give me his love, his healthy love, and for me to keep pushing it away. And so that was kind of the end point, like the low point, where I was like, wow, I can't even keep this relationship around. What, I'm going to be alone forever. Like, I need to do something about this.
Mm-hmm. And we know the end of the story because you're now married to him and you're expecting your first child. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, congratulations. So we know the end of the story, but I almost wanted to ask, why did he stick around? And I didn't know that you guys had broken up at that time. So how did you guys spend the time repairing it? Did it take a while?
Yeah. We had a very short breakup period. So my tendency is to be like, oh, you want to leave, like, get out of here. And so he didn't live in New York at that time. He lived across the bridge in New Jersey. So it's not like he could just kind of go home. Or if he went home, he wouldn't be coming back. And I think that made me realize that, oh no, I really don't want you to leave, and that was a really vulnerable point for me. And he's like, do you want me to just walk around the block? And I was like, yeah, just take a walk and come back, like, whenever you're ready or something. And so he took a walk for a while. In the meantime, I called my mom. I was hysterically crying. And he came back and he's like, I actually don't want to break up with you. Like, I don't want this to end. And that's when we got into a much more honest conversation about what really led up to this. And though he had and still does treat me amazing, my trauma that I was bringing into the relationship was triggering his stuff. Like, I was being really controlling. I didn't trust him. He grew up with, a hard, like, kind of like a tough father who they never trusted him. They try to, like, keep tight reins on, so it was like my stuff was triggering his. And what happened is, I really just subconsciously tried to heal my trauma through him, which obviously isn't fair. That's not his job. And even if he was the best therapist in the world, that's not his job as my partner either. And that's what, that is what happens a lot of times when we do carry past trauma into our relationships and it hasn't been resolved yet. We want the partner to reassure us. We want the partner to heal it for us, whether we're doing it consciously or not. And that does end up pushing them away, because they're not gonna be able to do that, and they're gonna get frustrated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. The current modern dating or modern relationship has an expectation that might have been created through generations or through TV and media, that our partner needs to be everything for us. They need to be our best friend and our confidant and our lover and our sometimes, I don't think you were alluding to this specifically, but sometimes we subconsciously want them to be our parents again, and I love Esther Perel's take on this, that our partner can't be everything to everyone.
Yeah, especially not our therapist. So yeah, we got into an honest conversation about that. And, I think we both realized that though I had been in talk therapy for the last few years, and I was really aware, like, even after I sent angry texts, even after I did something to push him away, I would be able to be like, oh, well, this is why I did this. I felt this way. And, like, that's fine, but it's not enough, because I was not changing anything. And so I took up my own healing with a dance therapy group. And he, I think our partners have to be patient and supportive of that too, right? Because it's not going to be like, all right, good, tomorrow I'm changing. And so I enrolled in this dance therapy group, and things that I was aware of, that I have been aware for so long, because I was kind of like, even as a younger teenager, like I've always had a deeper awareness of myself as well. But suddenly it was all shifting in my body, and I could, I could feel triggered, but not necessarily react. Like, I needed to rewire my nervous system from this place of fear, from reacting before I could even choose the way I wanted to respond. And that, that needs to happen through the body and through movement, because we store trauma in our bodies. Most of the trauma that we store are in our bodies, because that talking, cognitive, intellectual part of our brains, that goes offline when we experience trauma. So I had all this trauma stored in my body. I spent all this time talking about it, which was helpful to an extent. But, if I was really wanting to change that and shift that, I had to go into my body. And so that's what dance therapy helped me do, is connect to my body in a safe way, and really access that body stored trauma that words can't access, and release it through movement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like you and your partner at that time, and now your husband, really built a deep, intimate connection, and at a transitional point in your relationship from this creator of drama to more of an understanding of drama. And he was very supportive on your journey to join this movement dance therapy group that you found. So was that timeline at the same time as you were getting your own master's, or was it before or after?
I had just graduated. I'd just gotten my master's, and that's when I met him. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you knew that you wanted to impact other people's lives through movement and dance, but it wasn't necessarily until you experienced it yourself to access that cellular DNA and those memories that are stored in our body that you saw additional change to talk therapy. Am I hearing you correct?
Yeah. I mean, as a student, I learned and experienced to an extent the power of that, from like a learning experiential place. But like many people who are holding on to trauma in their bodies, there was a resistance there. At the beginning of my program, I had mentors say, hey, go to dance therapy. And I was like, yeah, whatever, I have a talk therapist, it's fine. And there's a real resistance, because when we've been so hurt in the past, when we've been rejected, abandoned, and we're holding on to that trauma for many, many years, there's a reason why, like, our nervous system, our survival system, the one that's like, oh, like, you gotta be safe, when that's, that part of us is convinced that connecting to our bodies, or accessing the trauma, is not safe, it's too scary, it's better just to, like, shove it down, keep it down, then yeah, there's going to be that resistance. And for me, I've always been a dancer, so I was still connected to my body in some way. But for a lot of people, it comes out in numbing, in being totally disconnected. It's like not even being in your body, from scrolling mindlessly on social media, right? From binge eating, it comes out in so many different ways, to do anything to not connect to the body, because the body doesn't feel like a safe place after, whether like, whether whoever's listening, you've gone through actual physical or sexual abuse, or it was purely emotional, the body is still the source that experiences the trauma. And so that's what happens, is we're like, no, we're not going there. And it becomes this lifelong struggle, especially for those who are really dedicated to their growth and have been going to therapy and talking about it or journaling. It's like, I don't understand like, I know why I'm doing what I'm doing, but I still, I still feel frozen inside, or I'm still reacting. And it's like this huge mind body disconnect and mind body struggle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can completely relate to that because for all of my adult life, since the time I graduated high school until even now, I've used fitness and nutrition to kind of level out my emotions, to kind of stay even without too many peaks and valleys. And I did that consistently for 14 or 15 years, maybe even 16 before I started talk therapy. And why I bring this up is because one type of therapy, if we're using physical movement as therapy, if we're using talk therapy to make a change in our life, it's oftentimes not just one type that helps us actually truly break through and reach where we want to reach. Like discontinue past patterns from reoccurring, which is what I'm hearing in your story, and I can relate in my own story, that the mind-body connection for me is the solution. Okay, combine talk therapy with jujitsu, talk therapy, jujitsu, and weight training, talk therapy, jujitsu, weight training, and nutrition.
Yeah, that's what I love about dance movement therapy is it's like an all-in-one package where, and I think it would probably be helpful to explain a little bit more about dance movement therapy. But I wanted to say that like there's a common misconception that it's, it's a certain kind of dancing or it's just all in the body, but we really fuse that, the nonverbal experience with the cognitive verbal understanding to get this, well-rounded, all-around healing that that is why it happens so deeply and so quickly and effectively, because it's like we're addressing the whole self.
And what is a typical like session or a class or an experience that somebody who wants to enter dance movement therapy, what would they experience during that time?
Yeah. So they happen in sessions, and like, so the simple way to put it is like, it's like talk therapy, except you're not going in and talking about what's going on and your issues. There's a little bit of that, but we are really working through that through the body and through movement. And it's not, a lot of people ask, like, is it specific movements? Is it specific dance? And it's not. And that's why I couldn't answer your question very like specifically, because it looks different for everyone. But I can give you a little, kind of an overview, because we all store our trauma in our bodies differently, and the way that each of us need to express it also comes out differently. So one client that I've worked with, a little bit of a backstory, she was freezing up with her husband every time there was a confrontation or an uncomfortable conversation that needed to happen. She really couldn't speak up for herself. And this is directly related to her past trauma in childhood, where she saw the exact pattern happening in her parents. Mom tried to speak up, dad was abusive. And so she knew in her mind her husband was nothing like her husband was nothing like her father, but in her nervous system, she was reacting this way. And the freeze response is, quite an ancient response. Like, if I can't outrun this predator, if I can't fight this predator, I'm going to freeze. And it's not really a conscious decision the way I'm speaking about it, but like the body will freeze, tense up their muscles so that they're not appetizing to eat. So just a little backstory on that. And so one thing that was really helpful for her is like, there's these metaphors, right? She needed to stand her ground. And that's something we literally were trying on in movement, of like, having more impact on the ground. That could start out with a simple walk, and it could turn into like more movement of like having more impact, moving with more strength, like really feeling that in her body. So that not only could she change the pattern, but she was also accessing that body memory, that sensation that triggers that memory from her past, so that she could release it. And that worked so well for her to like really go there in that place of movement, where she was then able, the next day even to be like, yeah, we had a conversation, and I finally spoke up, and things turned out really, really well for her and her husband. Whereas before, things were stale. They were just like, I don't understand why you're not talking to me, like why you don't fill me in on anything, why you just kind of stand there and don't say anything. And it changed their entire relationship where they could actually connect more. Whereas another client who has even a similar story from her childhood, when we started moving, like she was all here, meaning whoever's only listening, not seeing, but like her body was very closed up when it was time for us to move. And by moving, I mean like there was no specific movements assigned or whatever. It was just like we were moving together, maybe mirroring or just warming up our bodies. Her hands and her arms were always really close to her body. And I helped her like really just gradually, safely start to open up and take more space with her body. And she's like, whoa, yeah, okay, this is what it feels like to take up space. And it was just so liberating for her, because she always had to be quiet. She always had to hide herself and shut down who she was, because she grew up with a narcissistic father. And so that was the difference between her talking for a long time in therapy about saying, well, I want to use my voice more. I want to take up more space. I want to be louder, to us actually doing that in her body in a way that was safe. Meaning there are other types of dance healing experiences that people, that practitioners do, but they go too far too fast, where they might be like, just open up and just unleash everything. And I've worked with a lot of those clients who were like, I was traumatized from that. It was, it was too overstimulating. So for us to gently and safely rewire her nervous system as she learned to open up, like helped her actually do that in her relationship. And again, connect to her partner deeper than she's ever connected in any previous relationship.
Yeah, I can see that subconscious body language where it's really trying to subconsciously protect our body by wrapping our arms and hands close to our chest for literal protection. That's probably not even something that they're aware of. I can see that. And it reminds me of an exercise that Dr. Glover uses. He's the author of No More Mr. Nice Guy, where he works with passive men who can't stand up to their partner. And he draws a line on the floor, and he will approach them in an assertive or aggressive manner. And he had one client actually step all the way back and bump into the wall behind him, like 6 feet away from that line in the middle of the room. And so those are the fight, flight, or freeze mechanisms in our nervous system that are really controlling us when we do shut down and go into that protective mode. And how has your therapy changed with both shelter in place, but also you're expecting a child too? So how has that therapy changed for you and your clients?
Actually, I've been doing this. So my team and I have been doing this therapy online for over 2 years now. So we actually have been online. We didn't have to go through the whole like, oh no, what do we do now?
Transition, right?
Yeah. So we worked with thousands of women like across 9 different countries for the last couple of years. So there really was no transition for us. And it's almost like the world is, unfortunately, because of this unfortunate circumstance, but it's like the world is kind of catching up now. Whereas, I mean, I still get this question of, well, how does this work online? And I've gotten that question from the beginning of starting my business, or actually transitioning my business to online. And yeah, I mean, it's really super powerful to do this work through the screen too. The way that we work is we're always moving with our clients. So there's like, there's just as much opportunity to mirror. There's sometimes even like an advantage to being online, not only because the client gets to come from their own space. When you've experienced trauma, it can be scary just to like come into someone else's space. But also because we have some advantages of, for example, I worked with one client who's like, she was very, very sensitive and emotional about being seen. And this was a perfect opportunity to explore that, because we have a camera and she can intentionally move out of the camera and back into the camera. And so that's exactly what we did, where I invited her to move out of the camera when she didn't want to be seen and choose when she wanted to come back and be seen. And so there's little advantages like that too, where you can't really do that when you're sharing a physical space. I mean, you can in a way, but yeah, there's some really cool opportunities that help people in new ways by doing this work online.
Mm-hmm. And has your purpose and passion and mission changed as you expect to become a mother for you and your partner?
It hasn't changed yet, but I can't imagine that it won't. Like having a child for the first time with my partner, I've definitely had thoughts of like, how is this going to rock our relationship? And is there going to be some trauma that comes up for me that I haven't worked through? Or, birth trauma is common too for people. So it's like, there's a lot of unknown that could definitely mix things up in a way that I've never experienced before, that we've never experienced before. And just the other day, I was like, we're having a baby in 5 weeks. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. And he's like, yeah, you do. And he's like, it's fine, just change the diaper, feed. And I'm like, okay. Like, that tends to be his way, or he's like really, really relaxed, and he doesn't really think forward, like worry about stuff in the future. Like if something comes up in the present moment, that's fine. But I'm like, let's talk about this, or let's prepare for this. So I imagine there will be some clashes there, but also our foundation is so strong that I have no worries about us not making it or anything, but it will make me a better therapist and a better business woman, like in this mission for people whose relationships really have gone downhill since having children, because that is a large part of our clientele, where it's like our relationship hasn't quite been the same since we had kids. Or my trauma has been totally stirred up from having kids. Actually, one of my coaches / dance therapists is working with a client right now who had that experience where she just like kind of hasn't been the same since she had a child. And that's, that in itself shows that yes, trauma is stored in the body. Because when we connect to our bodies, or when we have like a new experience in our bodies, that trauma is going to get stirred up. So of course, birth being this totally new experience with your body, intense experience where you kind of can't avoid being in your body unless you're, totally knocked out. It's going to stir up some stuff where, oh wow, this trauma that I've successfully put off and pushed down for a long time, like it's here. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the really cool things about the work that we do is by helping our clients connect to their bodies in a new and different way, it does inevitably stir up trauma. But instead of going into a full-blown trauma response, instead of going into that freeze or that fight or flight that, you know, they normally do with their partner, we actually help them regulate through that so that it doesn't get to that point, so that they can stay present and connected in themselves and in the therapeutic relationship. And that makes it really easy to then take that out into their romantic relationship. Like if they're having that, like if they can rewire that response in the session itself on the spot, then they're already able to do that in their relationship, which is, again, why it happens so smoothly and quote unquote magically, which is a word that a lot of our clients use as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And there is no greater teacher than children for us to reflect back on us what our generational patterns are, what our own past patterns that aren't resolved are. And Madison, my daughter, was born with an emergency C-section. So there was a lot more trauma involved there because we potentially could have lost both mom and baby at that time. And of course, like, I don't necessarily want to repeat that trauma again. So having another kid was never in part of my life plan, you know, and her mom hasn't had any more children ever since either. Probably for different reasons than I haven't, you know. So raising her, she turns 18 next month, seeing my reflection in my child of, oh, okay, well, my parents oftentimes greeted us with discipline and assertiveness and anger when we were being punished. That's how I parented as well until a certain age, and she was just no longer responding to it, and our relationship started to deteriorate. So that was probably the initiation into a growth phase for me, is like, I don't want to lose a relationship with my daughter, so I'm the one that needs to change.
Yeah, that's definitely an honorable thing to realize and own up to. And when we can see that what our, you know, child or partner, I can really only speak from the partner perspective at this point, is a reflection of us, a reflection of something that represents us. It's, you know, it's such a difference from where I used to be, where the clients who've gone through my program used to be, is like the constant nitpicking or the blaming. And it's like, I was actually just writing a blog today, and I talked about one of my clients who would just wake up every day, look over at her husband and be like, oh, like this guy again. And, you know, she was so unhappy with how lazy he was, and like, you know, why can't he do more? And, you know, when we really dug into like the process together, she admitted, I've been wanting to start my own business for the last 20 years, and I've just been putting it off. And oh, it's actually me who I'm pissed at. Like, it's me who I think is lazy and not doing enough and just making all these excuses. It's not about him. To be able to release that and then heal the trauma that's driving her resistance to, right, putting herself out there, being more seen, not only saves her relationship and saves her from sabotaging her relationship, it can also bring her closer to, you know, she actually took the steps to start her own business from then on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, conflict breeds connection. And I think that that's something that we're learning right now, is that to shy away from conflict is to shy away from an opportunity for growth with or without a partner.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the conflicts, and I say this from always the body perspective, like, even if there's not a cognitive or intellectual awareness of something, but it's just like you feel heightened anxiety, or you feel tension in your body, or there's something that feels off. it's like we culturally, right, we just want to get rid of that or numb it, but it's like that's your body signaling something to you, that there's something that needs to be resolved or worked with here. That's usually the point where clients come to work with us. It's like, yes, there's a fair share of people who are numb, but also like they're having medical issues that don't really have a medical explanation, like autoimmune fibromyalgia, and they've been to all these doctors and there's no real answers. And they're like, yeah, I think this is the trauma that's, this is related to my trauma. I know it, I feel it, right? So that's usually another layer that is co-occurring with the relationship issues.
The Body Keeps the Score, I believe, is a book that you're a big fan of. I struggled through that one, but it was very impactful in the stories that the author would tell about how our cells really do store that memory, and the body keeping the score almost is like the key piece of awareness that we need to understand as trauma survivors, is that the true release is not just one quick fix. It's not just one thing that's going to help us. It's how is that presenting in dis-ease in our lives and in our bodies. And you were touching on the medical presentation, or the inflammation in the body as a representation of our dis-ease, mentally, emotionally, physically, all coming together to give us a sign to take action and movement forward.
Yeah, and I mean, like, the medical stuff is definitely not my expertise, but in that book, he does explain that when you, even when your mind is like, right, and I'll relate this back again to relationships. My partner is safe. I'm with someone healthy now. I'm actually in an amazing relationship. There is no real threat here. Your mind can keep saying that, but as long as the trauma is stored in your body is constantly registering threats, danger, life-threatening signals, which releases cortisol and weakens your immune system. And so even in your mind, when you're like, things are fine, things are good, you're getting really sick. Meanwhile, if you're not taking care of it, and that's huge. I mean, that actually does become life-threatening.
Yeah, I would see that quite a bit in our personal training business. I was telling you this I was telling you about this earlier, that our clients were holding on to excess unwanted weight as a protective mechanism, but also because that cortisol level was elevated over a period of time. And that's why we weren't reaching our fitness goals, because the body was holding on to it and our mind was holding on to the limiting belief of, I'll never get there, I'll never be successful, I'm not worthy of having the fitness level that I want in order to live my best life.
Yeah, and in that case, the mind's not even on board.
It's offline.
Like, yeah.
Definitely. Well, Orit, if your message resonates with our audience today, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Yeah, and so I actually would love to offer your audience a free gift, if that's okay with you.
Of course, we'd love that.
Awesome. So I have a free training. It's called Wired for Love, and actually thousands of women across the globe have gone through this training and been like, whoa, just really realizing that even after going through trying a lot of different healing modalities, they go through this training and realize, okay, wow, like this is how the trauma is stored in my body. This is how my nervous system is reacting. And the training actually helps you understand how you can rewire your nervous system and heal your trauma, and also change these old funky behavior patterns that, you know, your mind is like, I just want to change it, but your body's like, no. And it comes with a free downloadable workbook as well, so that, you know, what you learn in the training you can apply to your own relationship and based on your own trauma history. So that training you can grab at wiredforlovetherapy.com.
Okay, I'll be sure to put that link in the show notes below. Thank you very much for the gift. I think that a lot of people actually benefit from that. If this conversation resonates with them as much as it did for me today. And before I let you go, because I know your time is valuable, what's one thing you want to leave us with that we briefly touched on, didn't get to, or that you want to expand on?
Yeah. A lot of the clients that we see are at a point where they're really frustrated, they feel broken, or they feel like damaged goods. And, if you're feeling that way, if you've tried a lot of different modalities, a lot of different healing, and you still feel like there's something stuck inside of me, you're like, I still feel like a prisoner in my body, or just, it's just not shifting. I really want to share and help you believe that you aren't broken, you aren't damaged goods. It's just that, there is trauma stored in your body that needs to be released. And that's just that's an approach that you haven't taken yet, and it can absolutely work for you. Because as human beings, we all have an equal neurophysiological opportunity to rewire our nervous systems and heal our trauma. So, if you did resonate with this conversation and you're like, I need to try another way, or like, oh yeah, maybe this could be for me, I definitely encourage you to sign up for my training, and know that, you don't have to be quote unquote fixed. It's just a different approach that's going to work for you.
Thank you very much for that. And now that you say that, it reminds me of a philosophy that I'm digging into a little bit. And when it comes to conflict, your patient earlier that you were talking about was projecting her fear of starting her own business onto her husband.
Yeah.
And I've come across this philosophy of pay attention to what is triggering you, not who is triggering you. And that can help us kind of become self-aware, but also guide us to the root cause of what's happening with that unrest and that disease that's going on in our body. Does that resonate?
Absolutely. And I think that's so important, especially because like when we're married or living with our partners, like they're literally the closest person to us. So it's
all the time
to be like, yeah, it's that. Like I notice when I'm irritable, actually yesterday I was more irritable, but I'm pregnant, I have an excuse. And I was like, I found myself being like, oh, why didn't he clean this dish? And I was like, oh, nope. And I never had that awareness I never made that connection before, but I know like every time now, like when I'm more irritable about something, when I'm like feeling less in control of my life, I will have that tendency, but I can stop myself now. So I definitely resonate with that. And I also want to say that even if you do have that awareness, it is possible that even with that awareness, you still can't change the pattern or the reaction, because the trauma doesn't only get stored in our nervous system, but also like in our physical body. And a lot of people will say, change your mind to change your behaviors. And that can work well for some people, but for some where trauma is so stored in the physical body, and we're so used to like this, the physical body is the vehicle for which we make actions and behave. So even if you do have that awareness and nothing is changing like it did for me, movement and changing that through movement in your body is going to be much more effective. So that's another message of like, don't give up hope or don't think you're broken. It's just another way that you need to go about that shift.
I can hear that definitely. To change your mind, change your behaviors. Certainly the mind is going to signal the body to take action and movement. But if the body is preventing any movement at all, like you're just describing, then that's definitely another roadblock that can be the only way out is through.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to spend more time moving my body to
Exactly.
complete the cycle of my mind tells my body to take action, and my body starts to listen after I've healed those wounds.
Yeah, the body is not so protective anymore. It can actually open up and listen for sure.
Well, thank you so very much. I really enjoyed our conversation today, and would love to catch up again in the future after you have this beautiful baby boy and we see where you're at.
That'd be amazing. Thank you so much for inviting me. I enjoyed this conversation too. Thank you.
It's my pleasure.